Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all. This movie is a horror film from Spain, Spanish language English subs, released in the year 2022, directed by Juan Balaguero, and this film is called Venus. So Venus is about an exotic dancer who works at this club that is owned by very dangerous gangsters. These are gangsters that sell drugs, and one evening after her shift she finds out where they're storing the product and she decides that she's going to go for a better life. She doesn't like the life she's living, it's very dangerous, it's very dirty, so she decides to steal some drugs, and the idea is that she's going to sell them and live a better life. But then the gangsters find out what's going on pretty soon, and now they're hot on her heels. And so she decides to seek refuge in this very old apartment complex where her sister lives. She hasn't seen her sister in a very long time, so she's hoping that she'll be forgiven and for the issues that she created for the family. And that's something that is very desperate, because if she can't seek refuge here, she doesn't know what she's going to do. So at first the sister doesn't want anything to do with her. She has a young daughter, and she says that this main character is going to be a bad influence. But then when she realizes how desperate she is, she says, okay, you can stay in my apartment only for a short time until you find out what you're going to do. And so this is what the main character does. But then the longer she stays at the apartment, the more she realizes that there is a strange occurrence going on that is far more dangerous than the gangsters that are after her. So what that is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Venus. To say that I was excited for this horror film was an understatement, because Juan Balaguero is responsible for some of my favourite horror films of all time, in Rec and Rec 2. Now in those two films he was partnered up with Paco Plaza, another director that I highly respect, and they just created films that were so much fun but scary at the same time, and just completely replayable. I've replayed those movies over and over and over, and they stand the test of time as some of the best horror films ever made. But then they broke off in Rec 3 and Rec 4, and they directed them on their own. They weren't quite as good as the first two, they just missed that magic. But I will say that's not a terrible thing, because those first two films set such a high pedestal as far as not only Spanish horror but world horror in general. So coming into this movie, Juan Balaguero's other individual pieces in Rec 4, The Nameless, Sleep Tight, they haven't been brilliant, but they've been very serviceable. And so coming into Venus, when I saw the trailer and I read the synopsis, I thought this is a recipe for absolute success. And so after watching Venus, I will say that although I was really disappointed by the end result, I will say that there is enough element of Juan Balaguero in this movie to make it worth watching at least once. But I just felt as though it wasn't fleshed out enough to a standard where I felt completely satisfied, which is something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I liked about Venus is what I like about Juan Balaguero as a director. He's a very fast-paced, breakneck speed storyteller, in that you never really feel as though you're dwelling on the negatives, because you don't have time. You're always on the edge of your seat because of what was going on. In this movie, especially in Venus, there are a lot of dangers from a lot of different avenues, and so you're always on your seat, and you never feel as though the movie is ever going to stop, and so you never catch your breath, and you never have real time to dwell on the negatives that this movie produces. And that takes a very skilled director to do it. Is that he's a director that doesn't really waste any time, and he's got very short films, and so that is a sense of self-awareness that he is a fun horror filmmaker, and he's not trying something that he isn't capable of. And so that's something that I liked about Venus. But I will say that the runtime also plays against it for reasons that I'll go into a little bit later. I thought the acting was very good. I thought the script allowed these actors to portray characters that you had a sense of sympathy for, especially the main character and his sister. I thought, alright, well, what is the issue between these two? And the family dynamic in the movie actually made me feel as though, alright, well, these are somewhat likeable individuals. But the movie's not really playing on that as much, and it wants to be a fun horror film. It wants to be a horror film that's going to shock you, but throwing in there a little bit of characterization is never a bad thing, and Juan Balaguero does that quite decently in all of his films, even Rec 1 and Rec 2. Although those movies are completely crazy fast, I thought it had enough time to actually give you characters that you could relate to in a way that is somewhat a fear factor. You basically don't want to see them get really hurt, and so that does create a higher sense of impact once the horror elements set in. I thought the cinematography was excellent, a very doom and gloom atmosphere inside this apartment complex. I thought the residents inside the apartment complex were very creepy, so the acting is all very good, the production levels are very, very good, and I thought there were some really well choreographed action set pieces once the horror really sets in, There is a little bit of blood and gore, and so if you are into that, you're going to like it. And there's a sense of craziness to this movie that I really liked as well. And so having said all these positive things, you're probably thinking, why didn't you like the movie as much as you did? And so the reason I can tell you that I didn't love this film is because it always felt like, although it was a very fast-paced film, it felt very rushed at the same time. So there are elements in this movie that are thrown in there that are really, really good, but unfortunately it just doesn't leave you satisfied because they don't linger on long enough to really satisfy your interest. So there's a side character called the Servant that I thought was absolutely fantastic, but is only in one scene and then it's forgotten about. Then there's other elements that are forgotten about, and I just thought as though it was skimming over the surface. And I thought the ending was really, really bad. It was really rushed, and it just felt as though the budget constraints weren't allowing this film to really shine in a way that I thought was typical Jaime Balaguerro. I just felt as though something was missing, and that thing that was missing, I said, was time. And so yes, it's very fast paced and breakneck speed, but it's always leading up to something that doesn't quite deliver in a way that I thought was overly satisfying, and that's why I was so disappointed with this movie. But pushing that aside, it is still breakneck, it is still very, very fast, it doesn't really outstay its welcome, so you will get something out of it at least once. But for me, there were so many elements in this movie that could have made this another masterpiece, but I just felt as though it was skimmed over the surface because it didn't have time to really flesh out these really good ideas that would have made this film even better. So the ending, as I said, really mediocre ending. Again, I thought it was very, very rushed, and it was just a bit of a cop-out, which is something that I was really disappointed with. But although it's not Jaime Balaguerro's best film, I will say that there is worse out there. There are moments in this movie that make it worth watching, but don't get your hopes up that you're going to get another absolutely fantastic Jaime Balaguerro experience. And so overall, for Venus, going to give this one 2.5 stars. I just thought as though there was a lot of really good material in there, but not all of it was used to its advantage. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.